Welcome to Catterall's Corner on Sporf. I'm Adam Catterall. Pleasure to be in your company and a pleasure to be in association with these lovely people at Sporf who believe that you need a little bit of an insight to UFC 263. Now, don't worry if you're not a big fan of the UFC. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll be thinking to yourself, this guy's into a bit of violence. I fancy getting on board. I fancy watching some fights this weekend and seeing it all go down in Arizona. If you are already a big fan of the UFC, you will know that this card this weekend is absolutely stacked. But before we get into the nuances of each individual fight, I think it's only fair that I give you the reasons as to why you should be tuning in this weekend. All right, now I've got 4 reasons really. You're sports fans. You've watched over the last 12 months sport without fans. Let's be honest, it's been rubbish, hasn't it? It has, come on. You tried to get into it, all those fake claps, those people in the sound boxes pressing buttons when goals go in and all that type of stuff. It just doesn't work. And no disrespect to the UFC, they kept the show on the road. It's been absolutely fantastic. The matchups have been brilliant. The best have been fighting the best. But sport without fans, it ain't the same thing. So let's be straight. Arizona this weekend is going to be packed out, and we're not talking limited amounts of fans being in the arena, it's going to be rammers. UFC 261, which took place in Florida, had 15,000 fans in attendance. 262, which went down in Houston, Texas, also had a packed arena, and this weekend is going to be absolutely no difference. When you're watching this on the TV, it adds to the experience and also gives the athletes that are in the octagon that extra 5 to 10%. So you might get a few more knockouts on the card. As well as that, we've got 2 world title fights. And we're not talking about world champions fighting guys off the door at Wetherspoons. We're talking about the world champions taking on the top contenders. We've got a middleweight championship fight and a flyweight championship fight. And both of those fights are rematches with a little bit of needle involved, especially the middleweight one. They absolutely hate each other. And a little bit of history is involved in this card as well. For the first time ever, the UFC are allowing a 5-round, non-title fight co-main event. It's not really a co-main event, it's a co-main event because we've got 2 world title fights, but you get what I'm saying. Nate Diaz, you know that name. Of course you know that name. He's taking on one of Britain's own, Leon Edwards. And you would think that that fight would be an eliminator for the welterweight world championship. Finally, the last reason why you should be tuning in, I don't know where you are in the world, but I'm going to come at this from a biased point of view. As you can tell with my accent, I'm British. I'm in for the British fighters. And this card is absolutely stacked with British fighters from the prelims to the main card, and they're going to get you absolutely pumped in the early hours of Sunday morning. Hopefully that's enough reasons to get you involved with UFC 263. Stick with me, because now I'm going to go through each individual fight to get you excited even more. Right, let's talk main event, the middleweight championship of the world. The champion is Israel Adesanya, and he's taking on the Italian dream himself, Marvin Vettori. Vettori going for a little bit of history. There's never been an Italian UFC champion. He gets the opportunity to do that at UFC 263. Now, as I said in the preamble, this is a rematch. These lads met each other in 2018. Israel Adesanya had his hand raised. It was a split decision. That fight was over 3 rounds. Obviously, this is a championship fight, and therefore it will take place over 5 rounds. The beautiful thing about this is that they absolutely hate each other, and it all stems from that first fight. Vettori, for some reason, if you've seen it, you'll know that maybe he's talking a little bit of smack here. He believes that he won that fight. He did get one of the judges' decisions. I don't know how that happened. He probably won one of the 3 rounds, if I'm really honest, but he's holding on to that and bringing it into this fight. He thinks that he was hard done by. Israel Adesanya, though, since 2018, has gone on to fantastic things. As you know, he became the champion. He's beaten the who's who in the middleweight division, and he dared to be great last time out. He stepped up to light heavyweight to take on the Polish power himself, Jan Blachowicz, but he fell short. The champ status eluded him. Now, a lot of people are looking at the Jan Blachowicz fight and thinking now that there is a blueprint to beat Israel Adesanya, even though that took place at light heavyweight and not at middleweight. And it comes from that wrestling base. Marvin Vettori has got a decent wrestling base. And if you look at that last fight between Adesanya and Vettori in 2018, that round 3, where Vettori most likely won, came from the wrestling base. He picked Adesanya up and dumped him on his bum. Now, Adesanya since then has most certainly improved his takedown defense. When it's up against the fence, he's absolutely brilliant. It's a myth that he gets taken down at will. His takedown defense is really, really good. What Jan Blachowicz did in the light heavyweight contest is that he took him down in the center of the octagon. That is what Marvin Vettori has got to do if he's going to have any success in this fight, because as long as it's on the feet, Adesanya is the king. Imagine this fight being like a bulldozer or a tank against a sniper, but the sniper every now and again has a bazooka in his right hand and he just might let him go. He's got one in his left hand as well, because he's absolutely mint, this kid. As long as this fight stays on its feet, I fully expect Israel Adesanya to put on a bit of a show, because when he's got his back up against the wall, when he's got something to prove, or he feels like he's got something to prove, coming off that loss, his first career loss in professional mixed martial arts, might I add, against Jan Blachowicz, and he's a dangerous, wounded animal. He always puts on the show when he most needs to do so, and I fully anticipate him to do it. But Vettori, he's got the bit between his teeth. He's determined, he's angry, he's a bit of a madman as well. Lunatic, you could describe him as. And if he gets his hands on Izzy and dumps him on his bum and grinds it out, he could start to pinch rounds. Easier said than done though. You've got to catch Adesanya first. So that's the main event taken care of. Let's talk about the co-main event. And when you say co-main event, that kind of dampens down or dilutes the effectiveness of the fight. Not at all with this one. This is where the flyweight championship of the world is on the line. Now, if you're a UFC fan, you will know that when these two went at it the first time around at the back end of last year, they dished up pure violence, a fight of the year contender. It was like watching two frogs in a blender for 25 minutes. It was that good. And I'm fully anticipating that it's going to be even better this time around. The flyweights, so the small guys, and you might think to yourself, well, they don't have punch power, they don't have the knockout power, they're not going to give me what I want. Trust me, these two are lunatics. Like, imagine wasps round that pint of beer that you've got on a nice hot day. This is what this is going to look like on Saturday night. Now, there's a couple of caveats to the first fight and how it played out, because the first fight finished in a majority draw. Deiveson Figueiredo, the champion, had a point deducted in that fight, and that's why we ended up in the situation that we did. Brandon Moreno most certainly did better than I personally anticipated him to do so, because Figueiredo last year was one of the fighters of the year. Traditionally, the flyweight division, it's been a bit dormant. A few years ago, a lot of people were saying that the UFC were going to can the division because it had got boring. We had Demetrius Johnson as the champion and he was beating everybody in his wake. Then, Henry Cejudo came along and threw the cat amongst the pigeons by beating Demetrius Johnson. Cejudo then obviously did what Cejudo does and went up and down in weight, flitting around, winning championships elsewhere, but then retired and vacated the belt, which kind of left everybody there with an opportunity to become the champion. Figueiredo took on the legend that is Joey Benavidez and beat him the first time round. The only caveat is that Figueiredo missed weight in that first fight, so therefore couldn't become champion. They made a rematch, boom, boom, boom. Figueiredo put in an even better performance the second time round to become the champ. He takes on then Alex Perez later on in the year, does him in good fashion. And here's the caveat to that fight with Moreno the first time round. He fought Moreno on 21 days notice. Now you might think to yourself, well, that's nothing. I've had people fight on 5 days notice, 4 days notice. We're talking about a championship fight turnaround. He was champion. 21 days later, he defended the belt once again. That's a quick turnaround. Now Moreno got his opportunity, put in a wonderful performance and did a fantastic job against Figueiredo and ended up with a majority draw. Some people think that he won the fight. I personally don't. That point deduction most certainly played a point. Now, we've had longer than 21 days to rest for this one, haven't we? Figueiredo's gone away, licked his wounds, dusted himself off, and had a good relax. A good 5-6 months in the ice bath, getting himself ready for this fight. I'm fully anticipating it to be just as good as the first time round, because Moreno, he is made out of concrete. That chin of his, geez, I don't know what's in there, but he can't go down, this kid. He took everything from Figueiredo first time round, and he still stood on his feet. But, and this is the big but, I've just got a feeling, because he's going to be fresher coming into this fight, Deiveson Figueiredo, the champ is going to get the job done. He's brilliant with his hands, brilliant with his feet, and the caveat, is that when it hits the deck, and it might do at some point, he's brilliant on the floor as well when it comes to grappling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So for me, I'm edging towards the champion, just like I'm doing in the main event. I know that sounds a little bit boring, but I think there's going to be a lot of and stills read out on Saturday night. But this is my one not to miss. Make sure you check out the flyweights. Right, that's your title fights done. This is the people's main event. Nate Diaz, you know that name. Even if you've never watched a UFC fight in your entire life, you've heard the name Nate Diaz. He is taking on one of our own, and when I say one of our own, I mean one of Britain's finest mixed martial artists in Leon Edwards. And that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with Leon Edwards first, because I think he needs a little bit of profile building on your platform so you understand who this fella is, right? Like I said, he's on the hottest win streak in the welterweight division, bar the champion being Kamaru Usman. If he beats Nate Diaz at the weekend, that'll be 9 straight victories in the division. That's unheard of in any division. That just doesn't happen. It's mixed martial arts. The best always fight the best, so therefore you're going to get bumps in the road, you're going to get defeats along the way. But Leon Edwards has done the business against 8 previous opponents. His last fight, contentious, it's a no contest because of an eye poke, but he's here with the big one against Nate Diaz. Now, his year last year, Leon Edwards, was supposed to be his big breakout year. UFC London was booked for March. We were all excited about it, and he was supposed to fight the former welterweight champion in Tyron Woodley. Then, like everything that has been affected in the world, the pandemic hit and UFC London was cancelled, so therefore he missed out on that fight. Obviously, travel restrictions then hit, and therefore a lot of the UFC events up until Fight Island in the middle of the year took place in America. So Leon Edwards couldn't travel to the States to take up certain fights. Tyron Woodley moved on, he fought Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns ended up fighting for the world title. The whole division moved on whilst Leon Edwards was sat in his pajamas at home. Absolute flipping nightmare for the kid. Then he gets taken out of the UFC rankings because of inactivity. Now, we're in a pandemic. He can't fight. He can't get to certain destinations. And also, he's right at the top of the tree. So he's not just going to take any fight. He's got to take the right fight. And he's got to take the fight that makes the most sense in order for him to achieve his dream of becoming the UFC world champion. He gets taken out of the rankings. He then books a fight with the hottest prospect in the welterweight division, a man that shot to fame on Fight Island last year in Khamzat Chimaev. The fight with Chimaev falls off. Why? Leon Edwards ends up getting COVID. Absolute nightmare. They rebook it. The second fight falls off. Why? Khamzat Chimaev ends up getting COVID. They rebook it. The third fight falls off because Khamzat Chimaev has got lingering, long COVID effects and therefore has had to take a little bit of time away from the octagon. So they rebook a fight with Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad was the 15th or 14th ranked UFC welterweight at the time, whereas Leon Edwards was the 3rd ranked fighter. Meanwhile, the whole division's moved on. There's been plenty of title fights with Kamaru Usman. Leon Edwards has not had his opportunity. He's been out the octagon for such a long period of time. He just wanted to fight. He fights Belal Muhammad. The fight finishes in the second round because of an accidental eye poke. No contest. You can't write this lad's bad luck over the last 15 months. He's cracked mirrors. He's walked past black cats and probably gone under a few ladders as well at the same time. He's had an absolute disaster. So therefore, the UFC have recognised this and thought, right, we need to do this kid a favour. He needs a breakout fight. Who do we pair him against? Who do you pair him against? You pair him against the original OG himself, the main man, a lad that's been in the UFC since 2007, the Ultimate Fighter Series 5 winner, a guy that's done it, got the t-shirt on several occasions, Nate Diaz. Diaz himself didn't fight at all in 2020. Off the back of UFC 244, where he fought Jorge Masvidal for the BMF title, a fight that was stopped on cuts and therefore Diaz ended up losing that fight. He's been completely out of action. Frustrating times for him because he wanted activity. He's back and he's back in the welterweight division. Now this is an unusual fight and it's taken a lot of fight fans by surprise because Diaz has competed at 155, 170 for the majority of his career. He recently said he's done with 155. He doesn't want to fight those guys anymore. The likes of the Dustin Poiriers at 155, Conor McGregor's at 155, even the champion Charles Oliveira at 155. If he wants to fight those guys, the best of the best, they're going to have to fight him at catch weights of 165 or 170. When he said that, a lot of fight fans went, okay, he just wants to fight blown up lightweights at 170 pounds. He then makes a fight with Leon Edwards. who is a legit 170-pound fighter at welterweight, a guy that's on a win streak, a winning fighter. Nate Diaz can do what he wants. He could pick whoever he wants. He could pick layup fights. He could pick whatever he wanted in the UFC and go, okay, and book it, no question whatsoever. But he's decided to take this. It's a ridiculously tough fight for him to take, but the ramifications are this. Nate Diaz has the star power. He has the profile. The fans will come out in force to see him fight at the weekend, no doubt about that whatsoever. Leon Edwards has the talent. The most rounded mixed martial artist that we've got in Britain, without any shadow of a doubt. Does he have the profile? Not necessarily as of yet. This fight, for me, even though it's not stated anywhere, is an eliminator for the welterweight world championship. Kamaru Usman is looking for guys to fight. He needs guys to fight. He's mopping up the division for fun. He needs a contender. This is it. If Nate Diaz comes through and beats Leon Edwards, he is without doubt right at the front of the queue and well within his rights to say, I'm fighting that guy and I'm fighting that guy for the world championship. If Leon Edwards wins, that will be his 9th straight victory and he's just beaten one of the biggest names in the whole of the UFC. Again, he can go straight to the front of the queue and say, listen, this is my body of work. I'm ready to rock and roll once again with Kamaru Usman, but this time we're doing it for the welterweight championship. You're gonna think this is crazy now because you've heard of Nate Diaz, you've never heard of Leon Edwards, all right? What I'm about to say might surprise a few, but mark my words. If Leon Edwards does not get overawed by the occasion, because it's gonna be a very pro Nate Diaz, fan-friendly crowd, let's be honest, they're all here for him. As long as he doesn't get overawed by that occasion, Leon Edwards has all the skills in the world and the cardio as well, because that's an important thing when you're fighting a Nate Diaz, because he can go for time. Nobody's ever finished Nate Diaz. Nobody's ever finished him, and the majority of the time when he's winning fights, it's because he's weathered a storm early doors and done the business late on. He's a talented, incredible mixed martial artist who's brilliant at jiu-jitsu on the floor. He's got good hands as well. But Leon Edwards has got all that too, and he's got cardio for days. I think that Leon Edwards can get the job done against Nate Diaz. And the way that this will play out, because of the scar tissue that's on Nate Diaz's face, I don't think Leon's gonna finish him. Nobody finishes Nate Diaz, but what I do feel is that a doctor might step in to the middle of the fight after about rounds 3 or rounds 4 and says, Nate's had enough. He can't fight on, his face is too blooded, he's been cut up, very similar to the fight that we saw at UFC 244 against Jorge Masvidal, and that would be the statement performance that Leon Edwards needs in order to progress towards his dream of becoming the UFC champion and getting that title shot against Kamaru Usman. Mark my words, as I said right at the start of this is the people's main event and it will be an absolute cracker. So there's the 3 main fights that I've got you looking out for at the weekend. The 2 title fights and the people's main event with Nate Diaz taking on Leon Edwards. But, as you know, I'm a Brit, and therefore there's a bit of bias coming your way now when it comes to British fighters that are going to be on the card at UFC 263, because there's a plethora of sensational talent. Let's nip into the prelims first and foremost, because again, I'm going to mark this as a world title eliminator. We've got Lauren Murphy taking on Scotland's own Joanne Calderwood, Jojo. She's had a little bit of a rough ride, up and down, wins some, loses some. She had an opportunity to fight the champion in Shevchenko. Shevchenko ended up pulling out the fight. She took another fight in the interim and ended up losing it. So therefore, there's been a few bumps in the road for Jo Calderwood. But Lauren Murphy is another fighter that I've kind of fallen for a little bit. Saw her in person on Fight Island last year. Not only did she put in a sensational performance, but I love fighters that rock it on the microphone as well. She got on the mic, she rocked it, she said she's coming for the champion, and I love that type of attitude. You've got to be able to do it inside, and you've got to be able to do it outside to make us be bothered about you. You know how it is. Anyway, these 2 girls are throwing down on the prelims. It'll be an absolute cracking fight. Keeping the British momentum going as well. We've got Darren Stewart in action, and this is a really interesting fight against Eric Anders. The reason for it is because they fought before. This is a rematch. The first fight ended because of an illegal knee. Anders, you would think, was on the up. He was winning the fight, but then all of a sudden, he had a little bit of a brain fart and he ended up throwing a little bit of a knee in there illegally, and the fight was stopped and the class as a no contest. They're redoing it, but they're redoing it at a different weight category. Last time out, it was at middleweight. This time, it's at light heavyweight. Interesting decision. I know that Darren's made the decision for that. He feels more comfortable there, but I was on Fight Island with Eric Anders. is absolutely gigantic. So therefore, he's going to be comfortable as well at light heavyweight. When two big boys like that don't have to cut weight, they don't have to deprive themselves of their calories throughout the course of fight week, expect fireworks in that one. That's also on the prelims. Kicking off the main card, here's a good one for you. Paul Craig from Scotland. He is taking on Jamahal Hill. Now, Hill is undefeated through 8 fights. Very, very talented fighter, but he's kind of had a little bit of a fast track to the top 15 of the light heavyweight division, whereas Paul Craig, he served his time. He had a little bit of a rocky start in the UFC, winning some, losing some, winning some, losing some, but then he got his act together and reverted back to what he does best, jiu-jitsu. He's been cashing checks and snapping necks for the last 3 or 4 fights, and he's been putting in some sensational performances against some OGs, no more so than Shogun Rua. What an opportunity for the Scotland's own in Paul Craig to make a bit of a statement and climb up those rankings in the light heavyweight division. It's a tough fight, very tough fight, but Paul, he'll be coming in there with an awful amount of confidence, and that is the fight that gets the main card underway in the early hours of Sunday morning. British fighters everywhere. Don't forget Leon Edwards is on this card as well. It is set to be an absolute banger. If you're not normally a UFC fan, if you don't normally stay up to watch this stuff in the early hours of your Sunday mornings, then this is the fight to get introduced to. Get your mates round, have a bit of a chat, discuss all the things that I've been speaking about on this video, use it as a few knowledge bombs that you can drop in. I guarantee you will be entertained. 2 title fights, a people's main event involving an absolute OG and a British superstar, and loads of British talent as well to get excited about. Come and join me next week because we'll be reviewing the whole card, and I'd love to get your thoughts on how you think it all goes down. So there you have it. That was my UFC 263 preview. I'm Adam Catterall. This has been Catterall's Corner on Sporf. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave your comments in the section below. I might have missed a fight that you're absolutely buzzing about, and if there is one, leave it in there and I'll have a little bit of a nosy and review it on next week's show.